So I'm here with George Petit, and you've been a farmer. I'm assuming you grew up farming,
Yes, sir. I grew up on a farm.
and after that you got into the seed business.
Well, I farmed up into the mid 80s, and then I got in the seed business in the mid 80s, and I stayed with that group until 2010. I retired from that group. I went to a startup. I like working with startups. The seed company I started with was a startup. I went to a startup there locally, and they sold out to another group, and I had a 5-year contract with those boys, and then when my contract ran out, I went back to work for another startup. So,
So let's get back to the farm. You grew up in Kentucky,
yes, sir.
Western Kentucky,
Yes, sir.
which big difference between Western Kentucky and Eastern Kentucky as far as
Precisely. You can't farm much in Eastern Kentucky.
right.
If you do, you're gonna really have to struggle.
Yeah,
But you might get enough out of there to have enough food to last you for a year.
yeah.
Yeah, out of a garden.
So what kind of farm was it?
Well, I grew up. I grew up on a general farm, cattle, hogs,
Diversified
very
farm.
diversified. No dairy, but then when I started farming, I row cropped about 3,500 acres back in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s.
So when did you start farming?
1966.
Okay. So did you go to college?
Yes, I graduated from the University of Kentucky.
Okay. It with an ag degree?
Yeah, I had an ag degree, I had an animal science degree, and I had a major in biology and chemistry.
Okay. So then you came home to the family
I
farm?
came home, yes. I came home to the family farm. My father was in very bad health. I came back to help him, and I stayed. And,
Okay.
And so,
And then you kept as a diversified farm for a while and then
yeah,
expanded the row crops?
I stayed kind of diversified. In '68, I got in the hog business, and
Which hogs were the mortgage lifters?
huh?
Hogs were the mortgage lifters.
Yeah. Well, I had to have cash flow because I didn't have any money when I started. So,
Yep.
yeah, I had to have something to generate some income on a weekly or monthly basis. So I got in the hog business, and we grew that to about 10,000 pigs a year. And back in the late 70s, actually in the 70s.
Yep.
And once I got that going, then I row cropped corn, beans, and wheat.
So let me ask about the row crops then.
Sure.
Did the row crop enterprise take off considerably after the summer of 1972? Was that kind of the catalyst to really grow because that was the Great Russian grain robbery happened?
Well, it really was a grain robbery in 1972 because I never will forget, I was flying back from Wichita Falls, Kansas at a meeting, and I was going back to Washington National and was going to testify before one of the committees up there. And I sat next side by side Dr. Earl Butts.
Oh, wow.
And he and I had a conversation. And this was in about 83,
Yep.
1983. So I said, Dr. Butts, I said, you remember at the Farm Progress Show in Galesburg, Illinois, what you told us farmers to do? He said, and there was a huge crowd there. You can't imagine. Dr. Butts and Spiro Agnew flew in there. He was vice president. And I said, you remember what you told us to do? He said, yes, son, I think I do. I said, you told us to produce it and we would sell it. And he looked at me with a sly grin. He said, we lied to you, didn't we? I'll never forget that. That was a good conversation. Yes, sir, y'all didn't follow through very good.
Right.
But so then I row cropped, had the row crop built, doing pretty good. And of course, Jerry Ford embargoed soybeans in '74.
Yep.
And at that time, I had about 22,000 bushels of beans, and I was still cutting beans. But so that was on a Friday morning. I called in, and the market locked them it up. Okay, like 9.78. Well, I told the man that owned the elevator, I said, well, Monday morning, I said, when they hit $10, sell them. I said, sell them. He said, okay. I said, I want 10. He said, well, it'll hit 10 easy enough. So, make a long story short, Jerry Ford came out 3 o'clock that afternoon and embargoed beans. Well, I heard it on the radio. I had a little old dinky radio. I had a 105 John Deere combine.
What was it? Diesel hydro?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
And so, anyhow, I heard this thing on the radio. We didn't have very good radios back then, but you could get the noise off of them. So I heard this on the radio. Well, I didn't cut the combine off. I just put it out of gear. I didn't climb down the ladder. I jumped off the ladder. Well, I run to my pickup. I don't walk, I run. So I run, because back then we didn't have cell phones. So
Right.
I run to the shop and I call up the elevator. And I said, I think it'd probably be a pretty good idea going to send the beats right now. He said, Willie, we got a $3 protection. I
Oh,
said,
wow.
so now we're talking about $6.78. He said, yeah. I said, well, hell with it. I'm just going to sit. They'll come back. They never did come back.
Ooh.
And I got $5.80 for that bin of beans.
Yeah, that was big money.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, you had Nixon freeze the price of beef. Then
Yep.
you had the Great Russian heist. Then you had the embargo on beans. And then we all blamed Jimmy Carter over what he did
the Russian.
with the Russian. He only embargoed one crop to one nation. Nobody else in the world was embargoed. Yet everybody blamed him for all of the export problems. That wasn't the issue. I did too. When he first did that, I was livid. But then I started trying to understand. And when you look at what Paul Volcker did when he was chairman of the Fed,
Yeah.
when he started jacking the price of money, October the 6th, 1979 was when he was given authority to do whatever he needed to break the back of inflation. So, and I met with Mr. Volcker.
Really? You got to
I
meet
met
Paul
with
Volcker?
him, and I had about a 30-minute discussion with him in Mayfield, Kentucky. My congressman was chairman of the House Banking Committee, and so I got him to come down and talk to us to try to stop him from doing what he's doing. I told him he's going to break agriculture. And so the Volcker rule, what really happened is the price of money blew up.
Yep.
And that made our exports so expensive that we lost our markets. So it really wasn't Jimmy Carter's embargo of wheat to Russia that precipitated this problem. It was the price of money, which we're into now. We're struggling with our exports.
Yep.
Because of the price of money.
And there was a total lack of liquidity.
I'll be first to admit, I was highly leveraged.
Yep.
I didn't know which end of the fulcrum to go get on. I swear to goodness I didn't. But I was making it work at 6%. But I was paying a 17.6 plan on $2.5 million. And when they jacked it around on me on about February of '80, I told them, I said, well, I don't know when we're going to have a sale, but we're going to have one. I lasted 4 more years, but then it was just endless. So, and it was really not good. I could cash out, pay everybody, and at that time.
Yep.
And if I'd stayed probably another 2 years, it would have been a disaster for everybody.
Yeah, so you sold in '84?
Yep.
86 is probably the absolute bottom.
Yes, sir. And I couldn't last to 86.
Yep.
So I was able to get out, pay everybody off. When I did, I didn't have anything left. I mean, everybody got paid except me.
Yeah. Well, yeah, 80. So when we talk about the farm crisis, I was born in '78, so I was too young to understand all of it. But I do remember the 80s. As a matter of fact, my next article I'm writing is about the John Deere 50 Series tractors, how they were built longer than the 40s, the 30s, or the ones that came after, except for the 55s. But they were built longer but lower production because just the farm equipment market just dried up.
Sure.
Everybody bought 4440s and 4430s, but they didn't have any money for a 4450. Mm-mm. And so I remember I can remember the 80s, but the way I look at the farm crisis, there's at least 3 of the presidents you almost got to blame. And, and Nixon, obviously, it's interesting. I just read a book that's kind of saying that Nixon and Butts actually knew what the Russians were doing, and they just let it happen because they wanted to get the farmer vote.
Yeah.
So you got them starting the Great Russian Grain Robbery, which gets this inflation in agriculture just exploding. And then, obviously, Carter with Paul Volcker was actually nominated or Carter did nominate Paul Volcker.
Yeah, he was nominated to head the Fed. Yeah.
Yep. So you had Paul Volcker in there, and then you had the Soviet grain embargo. So you put some on Carter. But as good of a president as Ronald Reagan was, he didn't do anything to help the farmer.
No, he didn't break the back of that price of money.
And actually, one of the guys I always looked up to is almost that I grew up with, went through the 80s, and he, lost it, got it back, started over. Always said that it wasn't until 88, the drought of 88, that we actually fixed the farm economy.
Yeah.
There was all kinds of ideas that we were going to fix the farm economy, but what happened, Mother Nature just cut our crop production, and we fixed it.
Block came out, John Block, he came out with the first part of the Reagan era.
Yes, because he was...
And he came up with the PIC program, or the concept of the PIC and all of that, which that helped. But if you weren't a genius, you couldn't max the volume, max the full benefit out of them because of the way they were traded and all of that. And, there was few people could do it, but not many.
Yep.
And so when Block left, and then Peter Myers, there was I think there was 2 secretaries after John left. Then Pete Myers came in there at the end of the Reagan era.
Yep.
And Pete was he was a pork producer, and he and I served on a legislative committee back in the 70s and 80s when we first started them with the Pork Council. And he always said, like, Petit taught me how to politic.
Yeah.
But Pete was a pretty good secretary. We've had some good secretaries, and we've had some that, just kind of milled around up there and drew the check.
Well, Block is famous for...
the dairy
he was the one that got the lawsuit over FMHA foreclosing on farms they weren't supposed to be.
Yes, he did. But there's a backstory to that. Okay? FMHA eventually put in place a strategy that they would lay aside the debt that the farmer couldn't cash flow.
Yep.
And after 10 years, if things had improved, they would bring that back in, 0 interest on it, and then the farmer could finish paying that off. Now, FHA did that, all right?
Yep.
All right. That idea started in Kentucky.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That idea started in Kentucky. And and it started in my hometown. But anyhow, that's the way that idea came to play. Now, you're right. They were foreclosing on farm after farm after farm, and it was wrong. It was just wrong. And here's the problem. Everybody's got to realize one thing. We're running out of farmers in this nation. You can't go hire a farmer. I don't care what you want to do. You can't go hire a farmer. You've got to raise one, and you've got to raise one on a farm.
Yep.
If you're going to have a farmer. And that's the bottom line.
And I say all the time, people try and say that the young people don't want to farm, and they're wrong.
No, they would.
But there's no opportunity.
I mean, our farmland's bringing $15,000 to $22,000 an acre. You tell me how many 24-year-olds going to be able to walk in the bank and bankroll a farm?
And that's exactly it. So when they talk about, I hear all the time, we need to get people and young people involved in agriculture. And what these guys are saying is they want somebody that'll run the sprayer. They want somebody that'll drive the semi hauling their grain.
Yeah.
There'd be no shortage of of people to farm if they had opportunity. Because, like, I think back to myself as a young guy dairy farming. I'd go days without sleeping. I could work around the clock because it was mine.
That's right.
I
I
was,
did too.
yep, I was building my business. So if you give people, so you have to have opportunity, and some of that responsibility falls on the older farmers.
Exactly.
You need to, so let's say the developer, the green energy guy is offering you this big money. You might have to just say, I'm going to help somebody else out.
Well, here's the deal. The best job in the world is the one you create.
Yep.
And so when you look at the opportunity to farm, there's so many farmers that are getting in their 70s. I'm 82.
Yep.
And so I mean, I'm in a very rare era right now with my age. There's only about 1% of us left out of my group.
Yep.
And so the interesting part is that we're going to have to figure out a way to bring young people in off of a farm that's been raised on a farm and involve them with somebody that doesn't have anybody that's going to come behind them.
Yep.
And if we don't, you know, I've got a firm belief. The aftermath of a great agriculture is a great nation. Bottom
Yep.
line. If you ain't got that, you're never going to have a great nation. And the other thing is, too, an ample quantity of food at reasonable cost is the only reason you can govern.
Yes.
Because any other time you can't govern if you've got social chaos driven by hunger.
Yep. And
So,
I don't think the American people understand
no,
because the subsidies get a bad rap, but the subsidies are absolutely the strings pulling agriculture.
it is the only thing keeping us in business. And the reason it is because they understand that last statement, an ample quantity of food at reasonable
Yeah.
cost. And what people don't realize, I'll take you back in history. Back when Nixon was president, they were, having riots in the cities, inner cities, and they
Yep.
burning them up, burning them down, looting and everything. Well, in 1966, they implemented food stamps, but didn't anybody know about them. They did not know a thing about food stamps. I mean, they were just up there on the books. Somebody found them, told Nixon about them. He said, well, my goodness, he said, pour the food in there.
Yep.
And they did. And guess what? The riots quit.
Yeah. Yep.
So the whole point is, I mean, the Arab uprising in Egypt and Algeria and all of that is over the price of bread. Most times, revolutions are driven by food insecurity.
Well, Marie Antoinette, right? Didn't she say let them eat cake?
Yeah,
Because
yeah. Well,
they couldn't get bread.
And she didn't get by with that either.
No, she didn't. She didn't. So, but I say all the time that we need to have opportunity for people to actually farm. And small farms are better for rural America and they're better for the economy.
Well, they support your rural towns.
Absolutely.
And we're losing that. I mean, it's almost like a tsunami.
Yep.
We are so restructuring agriculture today that it's like a tsunami, and I'm deeply, deeply concerned that we're going to lose that human touch with that farm that you own.
Yeah, I think animal agriculture, so that's the solution to have more small farms is spreading out animal agriculture. And I think animal agriculture wouldn't have consolidated and got as big as it is had we not had oversupply of cheap row crops.
That helped. Now, let's go back in history a little bit here. In 1984, there were 458,000 pork producers in the nation.
Yep.
Okay? All right. In 1992, that had dropped half. And by 1998, that half had dropped into half. Now, think about this. From 1984 to 1998, there was not a day in that whole period that you couldn't sell a hog for a profit.
Yep.
Yeah, we lost 80% of our producers. Think about that.
Wow.
So what is amazing to me is what happened was technology started consolidating these hogs. And,
Yes.
there were, and we took them out of the mud lot, we took them out of A-frames, and we put them in farm houses, and we put them in big nurseries and all of that. I gave talks all over the nation in 78, around 78, 79. I was one of the first people to break the barrier on weaning pigs at 10 pounds. And I went all over. The blizzard of 78, I was in Des Moines speaking to the Iowa pork producers annual meeting, how to wean pigs at their, you know, the 10 pounds or 10 days, whichever came first. And so from that point, that's what started, bringing in fine houses and all that, started consolidation. Well, what happened was there was so many of those farmers didn't want to make that investment.
Yeah.
And so they quit. So as that investment increased in value, then they started building more hog houses and this and that. And now we've got this thing. I guarantee you that in the state of Kentucky, I can have a pork producer meeting at this table.
Right. Absolutely.
And at McDonald's and buy a senior coffee at that.
What's that?
And at McDonald's and buy a senior coffee at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's consolidated that much.
Yeah. And did you see, so being in the hog industry, you saw the rise of the confinement buildings, pits under barns, all that. Did you see the integrator thing coming?
Matter of fact, in 1970, I gave a talk to a local young farmer group. And I told them, I said, we are going to consolidate grain production, livestock production. I said, the only thing that probably won't be consolidated is vegetables. And I said, don't get me wrong. I said, they'll be bringing vegetables out of California and out of Florida and out of Mexico, and they'll be done by big companies. But I said, at a local level, we won't consolidate vegetables. And I use the analogy in the pork industry. I used to talk to groups of farmers about the pork industry, what it can do for you, because I was president of Kentucky Pork Producers there for a time, and I was an early joiner in the whole pork council event, and when it was voluntary, and then we of course moved to legislative, which I played a role in that. But the point is that I would challenge the people in those rooms to say, where can you sell a chicken? I said, where can you go sell a chicken today? And this is when the big boys, Tyson, Pilgrim, and all those fellas were consolidating it, and then they were doing their own slaughtering and processing and brand labeling, Tyson or Purdue or whatever, in the grocery store. I'd say, where can you go sell? I said, that's where the pork industry is going to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, the reason why is because we're taking them out of the barn lot, we're taking them out of the E-frames, we're taking them out of the mud, and we put them in these huge buildings where we can control everything. And I said, the pork boys is next.
Yes.
Now, I said, cow-calf, you'll never consolidate it. I said, you can't do that. Well, we've already proven one thing in the cow-calf business. It's getting too expensive to be in the cow-calf business. If you got $15,000 an acre ground over here, you sure won't keep it in pasture.
No.
So when you look at that, that part. Now I've got a small cow herd, but it's not a life event for me. It's something I love to do, basically.
Yeah.
But my point is that the cattle industry, from a cow-calf standpoint, I think will be okay as far as consolidation. It won't happen.
Yeah.
But I think we need to be aware of what's available in Brazil, what's available in Bolivia, Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay, and South America, and Mexico. So,
well, and I think the one thing that might bring some small agriculture back, and it's fairly recent, was COVID changed the consumer.
Sure.
And people suddenly want to know where their food comes from, and they want to know how their food. And So obviously beef prices, we're seeing record beef
Right.
prices. And typically there was a you know, a lid on beef just because consumers wouldn't spend the money. And they always said, well, as soon as the beef price gets too high, obviously restaurants quit selling because nobody will go out to restaurants. But COVID made people stay home and learn how to cook.
Yeah, yeah,
So now you can go out to a restaurant, get chicken, or you can stay at home and eat filet mignon.
right. It's the same money.
Right. So I'll stay home and I'll eat filet
Yeah,
mignon.
I would rather go on and stay at home eat my filet than I had to go buy me some chicken that I can go to Walmart and get for nothing. I mean,
Right.
bottom line.
So that's where I think that there's some niche there. The dairy industry. So I grew up dairy farming and with hogs, but the dairy, I never thought the old farmers used to always say that. They said they're never going to get dairy because dairy's too much work, and there's
They have.
and they did.
Yeah, yeah. And it goes back to technology and consolidation.
Yep.
That's what it goes back to. And I mean, I got a big Amish community in my state.
Yep.
And those guys are just quitting the dairy business right and left. They can't make a living with it. They
Yeah.
pick up a hammer and they go in town and build it, if you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying. And it beats the dairy because the dairy just, there's a few out there still, but if they get a chance, I guarantee you, they pick up a hammer and go to town too.
Yeah.
But the whole point is that we're having a major restructure in agriculture. In 1968, I started no-tilling.
Yep.
I was one of the first no-tillers in the state of Kentucky. I bought the third planter in the state of Kentucky.
So was it an Alice?
Oh, yes, it was one of them Alice jammers with a chain on the back, and those things were exposed, and you'd have to get off every half around and put it back on. I mean, we didn't have monitors back then.
Was it a 6-row then?
Yeah.
So, okay, so quick, I a little while over the place, but the 105 combine then, did you have a 6-row corn head
Yeah.
for the 105?
Yeah. Yeah.
Boy, that was a fancy combine. The hydro diesel
Oh,
6-row
shoot,
head.
yes. I mean, I bought it used, and I got for pretty good money.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first 6600 I bought.
But I heard guys say that a 105 would walk all over a 6600.
It would. But the thing is, I had so many hours on it that I had to go do something else. So I bought a 6600. I put $6,800 on that machine.
Really?
Yeah. And we got to be experts on 6600 and the 105. And then we went to the international rotaries.
Okay.
And I had 3 of them, but we just had to have more volume because I've gotten so big at that time. I mean, it's not big now, but I've got clients that are 30,000 acres.
Yep.
And so they're making it work. So the point is that at that time, that was, had to have more volume because even though we only have 1,600 acres of corn, then we had a full crop beans, then we had a wheat beans. I started double cropping in 1970. Wheat beans behind wheat.
Yep.
Yeah. I started cropping then. So, I mean, I've been the whole gamut. I'll tell you this cute story. I was 6 years old now, and I could bring the wagon and a team of mules. We picked corn by hand back then.
Yep.
48. And so I was the one, big boy. I mean, I'd take the mules from the field to the crib, and then we'd scoop corn out of the wagon in the crib. And so I'm coming out, and US 62, which is back in the 40s, 50s, and early 60s, that was the main thoroughfare across America. Well, I pull out on the road with a team of mules and this load of corn, and some car comes up behind me, and he sits down on the horn. I'm talking about, I mean, in a major way. Well, those mules did not like the sound of that horn, and they took off. And when we finally got stopped, I was underneath the seat, and there was 2 ears of corn left. They'd run over ditches, through fences, and everything. It was the biggest mess you ever saw. And so in 1970, we went to a corn picker, and we had a John Deere corn picker, And those fellas, when they first made those corn pickers, those splines, where your snapping rolls come
Yeah, there
in,
were no stripper plates.
they would strip off. They didn't make them heavy enough. And so Deere was sending people down to try to figure out how to make it work. And finally, we had a black fellow there that worked for us, been with us for years, and my best friend, really. And he worked for me and my dad in 44 years. And he finally standing there, he said, all you got to do is beef those things up and they'll last. So he went back and started building some heavy ones and made it work. But yeah, I've had a wonderful life in agriculture. I really, really have. I've been through a lot of tough times, but I never lost touch with the dirt.
So, well, and I guess we can end back on that note, but so you quit farming, you sell. How'd you end up in the seed business?
Well, it's kind of, fella told me about this outfit in Iowa. Said that there's a company up there by the name of Gar Seed Company starting up. And he gave me the number, his 800 number, 800-831-1850. I can still remember. Well, I call in, this lady answers it. And so I said, is this Gar Seed Company? She said it is. I said, well, I need to talk to the sales manager. And I didn't know his name. And so she said, George Madison? I said, yes, ma'am, that's the man I want to talk to. I mean, I didn't remember the conversation today. So Mr. Madden's comes on the phone, and we're sitting there talking on the phone, me in Kentucky and him in Iowa. I'd never applied for a job in my life. I had always worked on the farm. I had never worked for anybody. I'd never applied for a job. And he said, George, he said, his name was George. He said, did you just make a cold call in here? I said, yes, sir. He said, well, I want to talk to you. And so he said, I'm going to send you to a place over in Lincoln, Nebraska to be interviewed by them. And I said, all right, sir. So they called me and we had a 2-hour interview on the phone. And he called back and he said, well, it was a pretty good interview. And so then Dave Garst called me. And so right here in Indianapolis, the regional manager for this area, I was at a pork convention here, the Pork Council, MPPC's annual meeting, and I had been a delegate. I was a delegate and still on the executive committee and the board of directors at that time. He comes in here and he hires me in the back of the room there, and that's how I got into Karst. And then I was in the Kentucky area, and I opened up the South for them, mostly, but Kentucky. Yep. And I built it into a really, 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 really important part of the seed business in Kentucky. And about 1 out of 4 acres are in Karst.
Really?
Yeah. So after that, after Karst sold out to Syngenta,
yep,
I stayed with them for 3 years. They were too bureaucratic to suit me. Karst was fun. Syngenta was, oh Lord, what are they going to mess up next? And so I retired, and then I went to a startup, stayed with them until they sold out to the major, and had a 5-year contract there. Then I left them and went with another startup, and that's where I am today. I just love startups.
Well, when you look at the seed business, so I always say GMO crops were a curse on the industry, on agriculture, especially the seed business. Because I think back to a kid, I mean, you'd go somewhere that there's a meeting and there'd be, boy, there could be as many farmers, there might be as many different seed company hats on, right?
Sure.
And then once Monsanto had a stranglehold on the market with their techs, I mean, heck, a local seed company by us basically quit because of, I mean, the tech fees got so high.
Well, the tech fees is what drives the price of corn today.
Right.
And the seed corn, and I don't get it, okay? I don't get it. They can raise that seed pretty cheap.
Yeah.
Those GMOs are in the plant. They're already there. In other words, they've been there for years. I mean, the BT's been there for years.
Yeah,
And
they
I'm
don't have to
ready.
keep adding
And
it.
right. But the unique thing about Monsanto, they hired one of the best plant breeders in the world, Ted Crosby. Dr. Crosby went in there and he understood corn states genetics. And so he went in there and he opened that thing up for them and he showed them how to manage their plant breeders. And that thing just ballooned with Dr. Crosby's strategy.
Yep.
Now he's been passed several years, but and he and I were good friends. He was the plant breeder at Garst when I joined Garst, and he was incredible man. And but both of us, he and I both, always give credit to Dave Garst for putting us in the seed business. And he was an incredible man. Yeah, he was a dreamer, but he was still an incredible man. And Steve, his brother, nice guy, and Elizabeth, that has a nature conservancy out there at
Yep.
Coon Rapids. She's a wonderful person. And so I was kind of my second home, really. I know so many people up there, and through the pork producer industry and all of that.
Yep. So when you see how agriculture turned out, when you were younger, obviously you wanted to be a bigger farmer. Like it was go getter, because that's Earl Butts told you to, for one thing.
I mean, well, I had the desire. I wanted to be able to farm 10,000 acres in late 60s. That was my goal. I wanted to be producing 500,000 hogs by 1990.
Yep.
That's where, and my model is what they're using today. That was going to be my model. But, and I was too aggressive for the period. You know, timing is greater than knowledge.
Yes.
And so consequently, my timing was off. My knowledge was right, but my timing was off. And had I done in the 80s what I was doing in the 60s and the 70s, in the late 80s, I'd have been off to the races.
Yeah.
It was just a matter of timing, and I'm not bitter about it by any means. It was a good learning experience, you know. But I had a wonderful career in the seed business. I'm a contract consultant today. I'm 82 years old, headed towards 83, close to I am 82, and I work every day, and I just thoroughly love it. And I love working with farmers. I love watching them. We move the needle. That was move the needle, move further.
Yep.
And I've got farms I started out with that, like in the 90s, 88, 89, 90. They were, 100, 105 bushels an acre. Today they're 210, 220 on red rolling dirt,
Yeah.
and not very good farmland, but we've moved that needle over half again. So I love doing that because these people got, they got income now.
Yeah.
And the tobacco thing's gone, and these people were tobacco farmers, and I started showing them how to raise corn.
Yep.
And so I've had just a rich experience in agriculture. I was state FFA president in 1960. And
You were what?
state FFA president in 1960.
Yep.
And so from that day on, I mean, I've graduated with an ag degree from UK, of course, and farm, got in seed business. I'm really dirt crazy, just to be quite frank with you. I'm just a dirt crazy guy.
So when you quit farming, you weren't bitter about farming. You still loved to farm.
Oh yeah, in other words, I wasn't bitter about having to start all over, really and truthfully. Matter of fact, I said, this is going to be a pretty challenging time. Let's just go see if you can do it. That was my attitude.
Yeah.
And I made up my mind, whatever I did, I was going to work just as hard as I did farming. And I went 17 years and never missed a day's work.
Yeah.
And I worked over 100 hours a week, maybe 110 a week, and 7 days a week.
Yeah.
I didn't let up. But until I ran out of money. But you know, Iowa is so rich in agriculture history. I mean, the, to me, in my opinion, I, Iowa is a center of American agriculture.
What's that?
Iowa is a center of American agriculture.
Yep.
No question about it. Farm policies developed there. The innovations are developed there. Yeah, there's a few innovations in Kentucky and around and to do, but when you look at the overall scheme of agriculture, you look to Iowa.
Yep.
You look to Iowa, and so I never will forget. I spent almost actually about 2/3 of the day with a fellow in Hampton, Iowa, Mr. Fred W. Stover. Mr. Fred W. Stover, back during the 30s, he came in to the Roosevelt administration, and he's the guy that came up with the Evan Norman Granary, which is now where we can put the corn under loan.
Oh, yep.
Yeah. So he was the guy that came up with that idea to kind of be able to pull that stuff off the market, and let the market kind of pull it out of out of storage.
Yep.
But he was the guy that came up with that, and it was an incredible visit, and I've never forgotten almost every word the man said. I still got it. But he worked with some pretty powerful people and with some great ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. So as you look at agriculture today, if you're in charge, would you do it different? What mistakes have we made? Obviously, productivity-wise, we've.
Here's the thing. If I could wave a magic wand
Yep.
to help agriculture overcome, we're in tough times right now. Our ethanol bump is over with.
Yep.
Okay, that's where we got the big bump. Our China deal is over with. Okay,
Yep.
so we've got two big market centers. One we've saturated with corn. That's the ethanol side. The other, we're going to have to go find a bigger market somewhere. I don't know where it'll be, but we'll have to go find one to replace what we've lost to China. So agriculture to me has got a bigger mission than just food. I am a conservationist at heart. I'm not an environmentalist per se and on
Yep.
the left side of the arena. And that's okay for a man to be left. But I am a conservationist. I believe within the framework that the only place to clean the air and clean the water is by the agricultural community. No other place can you do it.
Yep.
All right. If you want to capture carbon, you can only do that with green plant material. It's on the plate.
Yep.
So, there's some novel events showing up, to capture carbon, but most of it's going to be captured on green plant material.
Yeah.
The other thing is our water. Farmers have got to learn how to better manage the water and the nutrients in that water when it leaves the farm. All right, we need public support to do that because the public benefits from that.
Mm-hmm.
The public benefits from these other events to sequester carbon or whatever. But my whole point is, to me, the future of agriculture is in the conserving industry as well as the food industry. And to that end, because our conservation efforts benefit all of society, just as our food production does, then I think we need to have metrics put to our ability to
Yep.
manage the water and the air.
Yeah. My mentality, and some of it comes with age, as I've grown older, matured. The conservation thing is more important. If you would have asked me at 13 years old what I wanted to do, it was hook up a moldboard plow to a big tractor and just turn dirt black everywhere, right?
Yeah,
That's
you were curious.
yeah. But I learned what I've learned a lot about my farms, that they're not all the same. They're very different. Like where we're at, western Wisconsin, that's the driftless area. You can have soil as good as anything in the world in places, and then you got spots that are clay hills that are. And as a matter of fact, I bought a farm that had some pasture in it that I got a sod buster on it. And some of it was just too steep, so I didn't sod bust that. But the stuff I did, we pulled soil samples, and this had been pasture. It was maybe farmed when the pioneers first settled, but it mostly grazing livestock. Nobody could remember it ever being tore up. The rest of the farm had been continuously in cultivation or pasture,
I
but
can already tell you what you found.
yeah, the organic matter levels were
No kidding.
considerably better. And
And your microbial community just blew out.
as a matter of fact, so there were swales that I ran some tile lines through, and I moved actually into the adjacent field through where the fence line had been. And as the spoil of dirt's coming up from the plow, the change in that soil, the minute you hit the ground that had been continuously cultivated versus where that had been, and you're like, boy, we really need to take care of.
Well, you hit on a perfect point there, and let me explain to you why. A lot of farmers, when I got in the seed business, still weren't no-tilling.
Yep.
Well, I would take them over to a fence row that had never been worked, and I just scrape back the residue and grab a handful of dirt and hand it to them. I said, this field can be just like that if you start no-tilling. And about 6 or 8 years into that, that's what you're going to turn your field. You can gel on no-till field.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, when I walk on our dirt, I always tell my friends, I said, I'm gelling, and because it's just different, okay?
Yep.
So to make a long story short, we have got to learn how to manage the soil resource where we can, and even though where you live is tougher, okay, but it can be done.
Yep.
All right. So, but we're getting more and more material that we can put on a seed or put with the seed that will help it through that crisis.
Yep.
Of cool soils or soils that got a little bit too much moisture in it. We're learning how to better manage that with the inputs. So, the way I look at it, the future is going to be driven by understanding the microbial community of the soil.
Yep.
We're going to have to learn how to use it and work with it, and it'd be a part of our effort. Another thing that I am thoroughly convinced that's going to happen, we're going to have to learn how to focus more on feeding the plant and let soil fertility be an assistant, but not the main focus.
Yep.
So I think that's another thing we're going to have to look at. The other thing is we're going to have to be a whole lot more proactive about our ability to conserve the soil, clean the water up, and help clean that up. We have got to be more proactive. We've got, there's a great person. I had a sales meeting. They were trying to teach us how to sell. I never did try to sell. I just tried to, okay, this is what I'm doing to help you. If you don't want it, that's fine. I'll go on down the road. I mean, I still had that farmer attitude, and I never got out of it. And I just think that we've got to point to the farmer and to the general public, he who serves best serves the most. And we're serving you with ample quantity of food at reasonable cost. But here's what else we can do for you.
Yeah.
But we've got to structure our message so that it will resonate in the policy arena. Because that's where the money's going to have to come from. We can't collect the money from individuals that's involved in this.
No.
Money's have to be public money because we're doing the public good. So.
Yeah. And part of it, my mentality has changed as far as even crop production. That pasture that I couldn't sod bust, it's getting pastured again. I grew up dairy farming, got rid of cattle, and I started buying beef cattle back to what we're going to use. We're haying our waterways. We got pasture that we can run on, and then I've got corn stalks after we take the crop off, we can graze those stalks for cow calves. And the other thing would be small grains. So as a kid, I loved growing oats. See, dairy farmers always grew some oats because you wanted straw. And you wanted some oats for your calf feed, etc. there used to be a ton of oats when I was a kid, you know, and when the county fair would come around, it was always fresh straw. Everybody was taking their oats off. And that went away as the dairy went away. And everybody went corn and beans. And, you know, it was a real easy transition for us. 16 miles to the port of Red Wing, Minnesota for export. So when you sold the dairy cows, you just raised corn and beans. You had markets.
Yeah.
But for me, when I wanted to work on my ground, put some tile, and I do some tile, fence line work or something, I found, well, you know, I can put some oats there. I'll take that off, and I've got all kinds of beautiful weather that I can work on this ground. And the soil, so they always told you, you know, you get a bump from your corn because of the nitrogen credits of your soybeans. And I never, yes, you had better corn after soybeans, but you know what's really good corn? After small grain.
Yeah.
The root matter.
Well, here's the thing. You gotta be selective on your cover crop.
Yep.
If I lived where you live, the second most aggressive root system is triticale.
Yeah, that I know dairy farmers that do raise triticale.
All right, your black oats will help break down the calcium phosphorus bond and make the phosphorus more available.
Yep.
Okay. Now I really have fallen out with cereal rye. It's a one. I mean, if you can't do anything else, use it. But the problem is, it presents many more problems on how to revise your fertility program in order to meet the challenge that cereal rye left you with.
Yep.
So these others don't leave you with that big a problem. All right. So as I love cover crops. I mean, that's really what I do now. I talk to farmers about cover crops, which one to use, which exudates to use, and all of that. Because each one's separate, different. We just don't know enough about them yet. But I'm going to go back to when you broke that field. When you break that field, you let carbon loose in the atmosphere in a major way.
Well, I didn't do a ton of tillage. That's one of the things I did, was I didn't really want to do a lot of tillage on it.
Well,
as minimal as possible.
Yeah, if you didn't break very much up. But my point is every time you work your land, you mineralize carbon.
Yep.
So if we learn, we're going to have to give the guys up north that have the black dirt, have all the challenges with no till. Where I live, so we don't have a challenge. We got red dirt, and it dries out real quick, and we got a lot of chert rock mixed into it.
Yep.
You come down there to the farm, you say, "What in the world are you stupid boys doing?" But I always told everybody we could plant earlier than most people because the rock warm up in the day and they release the heat at night. So we could plant earlier than most people. But to make a long story short, we've got to learn how to sequester the carbon, and we've got to learn that we can sequester water, and with our cover crops, and we can help clean it up. In other words, to me, actually, that's the only place we got to go from a profit standpoint to hold our money together.
Yeah.
But this commodity thing, unless there's some political events that show up that I'm not aware of, we're going to struggle.
Well, it's a race to the bottom is what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a race to the bottom.
Because I had just said that recently, that, you know, look around a group of farmers, it's like, you might, in another 10 years, a third of us are going to be gone again from, eventually there's going to be one farmer left. If that's all you do is raise corn and soybeans, they just get bigger and bigger. We got to get bigger, we got to get bigger.
I deal with big farmers, okay? And I've watched it. I got one customer that's 32,000 acres. I had one customer at 38,000 acres. I've got another customer that I've worked with just a little bit, not much. He was about 31,000 acres. With the exception of one, the other two have collapsed. In other words, when I say collapsed, they're back to 8, 9, 10,000 acres.
Yep.
Okay? One completely collapsed. So my point is, I think when you look at the size of the farmers, there's a scale out there that you can't keep climbing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a hill that's going to get too tall, too big. So they said, we're going to be a hill you can't climb. I don't know whether it is. But my concern is, even though that big farmer is there farming these magnanimous acres, who's he going to get to help him?
Yeah.
And you know, it's just like a good tractor driver or man to run the planter or any of those things out there. You can't put a illiterate in there. You got to have a pretty high tech fella that runs
Yeah.
those
Oh yeah.
machines. And so my biggest concern is the human resource to farm the land and the human resource to help the farmer farm the land.
Yeah. Well, and I hope maybe we see, like I said, with this rise in other crops, as far as you know, in the livestock thing, the small livestock, because that's speaking of cover crops. When I ended up, you know, really enjoying growing more small grains, I actually invested in the Green Acres Milling Project down
Sure.
there in Iowa. So I'm one of the farmer investors,
Okay.
and then the cattle thing worked really well because see, after the oats come off, well, then there's red clover.
Yeah.
Well, red clover makes damn good silage.
Oh, it's wonderful.
So we've got now the cattle work well with doing the small grains and the cover crops after it. And then you've got, like I've told my daughter, I said, 'cause she loves the cattle. You know, the row crops, the kids never really took that much of an interest. That was a dad thing. But
That's really interesting. You go to this end of the field and turn around, and you come back up this end of the field and turn around and go back
yeah,
that end.
yeah,
There's a whole lot of interesting things happen between this end and that end.
yeah. But the cattle, and I said, you know, being as close to the metropolitan Twin Cities as we are, that Twin Cities metropolitan area, there's tremendous opportunity to sell.
Oh,
Direct market.
If you've got a population center,
Yeah,
if you've got a population center, you can do really, really good in that population center, even on a recreational side of the equation.
yeah,
Not just the food side, but the recreational side of the equation. If you're near a metropolitan area, I know about a fellow up in Illinois. He makes more money with this Christmas light deal coming out of Chicago than he does farming.
yeah,
So
yep,
I mean, he has his farm, decked out in Christmas lights. But my whole point is that there's going to be some opportunities like that. But when you look at commodity agriculture, we got a big hill to climb.
yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah. And I mean, like in the state of Kentucky, we got all these farmer markets. Well, I promise you, I've got one farmer that'll spend more money putting out a crop than those folks will bring in the summertime.
yeah,
I'm serious. I mean, they're nice, they're quaint, fine. The little girls can go out there and get something and make them feel good that they're healthy eating and all of that. But at the end of the day, that's not what's going to feed the people.
no, but if we can diversify somewhat, maybe, and I think diversification is going to be real critical versus, you know, they told us years ago specialization was the answer.
Sure.
And
I was in that generation.
yep, and that was probably not the thing to do. I mean, diversification is what got guys through the hard times in the dirty 30s.
Yeah. Well, I mean, actually, we lived off the land in the 30s.
Yep.
I mean, there was, basically speaking, what allowed us to survive the 30s. We were living off the land, no different we were in 1900. Okay? Yeah,
Yep.
there was some movement into, production, industrial agriculture, I think
Yep.
is a better word. There was some movement into that during the 30s, but actually it's after World War I, II, when the folks come back from the farm
Yep.
to the farm. First thing, we had lights on the tractor. That meant you could run them 24 hours a day.
Yeah, World War II, often gets overlooked just because we had to not only continue producing, we had to increase our production to make up for Europe and do that with less workforce.
Well, you had Europe was blown apart.
Yep.
So we had to be able to help Europe through that food crisis.
Yeah.
All right. They didn't have an infrastructure to really process the food at that time. And the unique thing about America in the World War II, we were one of the few countries in the world that wasn't blown apart.
Yeah.
And so we had the infrastructure to be able to do everything, and we had a lot of technology, machine technology that was coming into play in the
Yep.
fields. We were moving away from mules, and we started moving into M farm hauls and 60 John Deeres and 235 Massey's and all of those kind of tractors. And,
Which is funny. I talked about this just this summer. John Deere lawnmowers.
yeah,
John Deere lawnmowers became popular because when the GIs came home from World War II, we didn't need them all on the farm, so a lot of them went and got jobs in the cities, and John Deere started making a lawnmower that was just like the tractor they had back on the farm. Boy, they sold like crazy
sure,
to those guys,
yeah.
But I think I think
I don't know.
that session is starting, so I should.
Yeah, he's in there. I see it on the board.
Yeah, I should let you go. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And good luck to you.
All right. I appreciate it.
All righty.